For many families and communities whose children were stolen from them, many were never returned home.
Tonight, First Nations in Manitoba are calling on the province to protect unmarked graves.
We had quite the battle on our hands for 136 days.
Plus, Nunavut's longest strike comes to an end.
It's important to look to that relationship that we have as people, that we have with the natural world.
And a Yukon First Nation welcomes salmon back with ceremony. Good evening, Tanse Anin. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The Sioux Valley Dakota Nation and Manitoba Kiwit Naui Ogamaganak are asking the Manitoba government to immediately protect potential unmarked graves across the province by using the Heritage Resources Act. The demands come after waiting since 2016 for the province to put up a barrier around unmarked graves of former Brandon Residential School, students located in the privately owned Turtle Crossing campground. The area originally had a fence and memorial cairn set up to remember the children, but they were removed in the mid-2000s. In 2018, land development plans prompted a geophysical survey. It found 56 possible graves in 4 camping bays. Sioux Valley Dakota Nation Chief Jennifer Bone says government inaction pits landowners against those who want to protect the area.
For many families and communities whose children were stolen from them, many were never returned home, even upon their death. In Manitoba, the tragic reality is worsened by a lack of enforceable provincial legislation to protect the burial grounds of our stolen children. Our request is reasonable. We simply ask that the province of Manitoba use existing legislation to provide all Manitobans, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, the confidence that the resting places of their departed loved ones will be taken care of and protected forever.
We are open to discussion and negotiation. We're willing to work with the property owner to ensure that these sites are protected, because the families have nowhere to go to pay respects to their loved ones. The families need to go there to find closure and sometimes to have ceremonies. So it's something that should be done, and that is unethical and immoral for the province to not to protect these sites, because they need to be preserved.
A group of residential school survivors from northern Saskatchewan is in court today after filing a lawsuit against the government. The class action lawsuit that was filed in December aims to get compensation for those who attended the Isle La Crosse residential school. The plaintiffs are saying they faced physical, sexual, and psychological abuse at the hands of school staff. A similar suit was launched in 2005, but survivors say it has been inactive. Today, the survivors are asking a judge to pause the old lawsuit so they can move forward with this new one. The Isle La Crosse residential school closed in 1976. The Nunavut Employees Union and the Iqaluit Housing Authority have signed a new collective agreement this week, ending what has become the territory's longest strike. Union President Jason Rochon said it was worth it.
We had quite the battle on our hands for 136 days. Our members held the line really well. They knew what their worth was. They were sharing their stories. They were using their voices. I was really proud of them. We're talking mostly young workers. So this was the longest one we've had in Nunavut. Of course, when you look at other strikes across Canada, many of them are a lot longer. We just recently heard from a member who was on a 14-month strike, so that's over a year. And you know, even 2 days on the strike, on the picket line is maybe 2 days too many. But, you know, sometimes you have to dig your heels in and you have to do the right thing.
A 3-year-old pilot project at the border near Cornwall is now permanent. It's proving to be a positive step for Akwesasne residents who live on Cornwall Island in Ontario. APTN's Annette Francis made the trek to the community to see how the domestic lane is working and what further changes could be coming.
This dedicated lane for Cornwall Island was put in place in 2020. The intent was to create a smoother crossing for Akwesasne residents who live on the Canadian side of the border, so they don't have the inconvenience of going through Canada Customs. It was a 6-month joint pilot project between the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne and Canada Border Services Agency, or CBSA. According to Akwesasne Grand Chief Abram Benedict, it's working well.
You know, we've heard positive feedback. Residents coming from Cornwall Island heading into the city of Cornwall use the domestic lane, so it does cut back on the time that it takes for people to get from Akwesasne, Cornwall Island to Cornwall.
It's been 14 years since CBSA shut down the customs plaza on the island. The agency moved it to Cornwall due to Akwesasne citizens' concerns over border guards on the territory having to carry firearms, forcing community members to go through customs. Akwesasne residents may now have this dedicated lane, but they still have to go through this toll booth. So Benedict says they're working on its relocation to allow for faster travel and even less wait times.
Right now, as it exists, is when you come from either Akwesasne, New York, or Akwesasne, Cornwall Island, you heading into the city of Cornwall, you come to the toll booth first, and then once you go through the toll booth, you go through the CBSA. What we want is to go to the CBSA first and then the toll plaza second.
Benedict says the relations with the CBSA have improved over the years with the creation of the collaboration initiative. He says training is key.
As new officers come to the area and work at the Cornwall port, they need to understand who the Mohawks are and why it's significant for us to be able to get through quickly, why our rights should be recognized, and why our community is broken up by Ontario, New York, Quebec, and the international border.
The domestic lane will become permanent in September. Meanwhile, there is no commitment yet to relocate the toll booth plaza. It is operated by the Seaway International Bridge Corporation. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Cornwall, Ontario.
All right, we've reached the point in our show where we need to step aside for a moment, but still to come, never-before-seen letters penned by Louis Riel are on display in Calgary.
What I included were his more personal writings, which were often very imbued with spirituality.
Welcome back to APTN National News. Social media giant Meta has confirmed that it's barring Canadians from looking at news on Facebook and Instagram. The move comes in retaliation to a new law passed by Ottawa that would force big tech to pay for the content.
Now, Meta says that this is a small part of their business, which is news. However, for Canadians, it might be a little bit larger than that, where this is something that they rely on to get news and content. And the question now becomes is this actually going to impact their bottom line? Are other countries going to say, well, wait a second, we're not going to get bullied by big tech, and we need everyone to work cohesively to find a solution to address this growing problem?
The University of Calgary has been hosting a unique exhibit in one of its galleries over the summer. Never before seen letters from Louis Riel to certain family members while he was exiled from Canada. APTN's Chris Stewart visited the gallery in Calgary.
Dear brother and brother-in-law, I'm very weak. Last week at the mission, I had a bad moment. So he's just sort of giving his family a warning, maybe I'm not feeling so good.
Devotion, Louis Riel Writes Home has entered its final month of exhibition at the University of Calgary's Nickel Galleries. The exhibit features private letters and a journal from Louis Riel to family from the 1870s to 1880s, mostly from his time in America from exile after the Red River Resistance. Annie Murray purchased the 50 or so items from a Calgary bookstore, who in turn bought it from people who said they were descendants of Riel. Murray is the rare books and special collections librarian at the university. She says she can't say the purchase price, but it was a significant amount. She then took the writings that showed Riel's life outside his very public profile.
What I included were his more personal writings, which were often very imbued with spirituality. And that's why I chose the name Devotion for the show. Louis Riel was profoundly devoted to his family. He was devoted to God, and he was devoted to the Métis people.
Riel is more famous for his political life in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. But these letters to his family, written mostly in French, detail his life across the many other parts of America he lived in.
So it takes us from this young man who's been involved in the Red River Resistance, 69 and 70, to these years in the 70s where he's living down in the States, staying with various friends, trying out various jobs, eventually moving west to Montana. So it's sort of this, what was Riel up to in those interlude years between these big moments of his life. That's what a lot of these letters capture.
Murray says the letters show unique insight into how Riel loved his family.
I chose these because they give some insight into what were the kinds of things that was on Louis Riel's mind, and also who was he the most connected to. He was very close with his sister Octavie, and then when Octavie got married to Louis Lavallee was basically his brother. They became so close. So it taught me who were Louis Riel's trusted inner circle. They were his sister Octavie, his brother-in-law Louis Lavallee. When his younger brother Joseph grew up, eventually Joseph became someone he wrote to much more.
One of Riel's diaries is on display. He wrote it, but others added notes in the back. Murray is hoping to find out who they were.
Following Louis Riel's execution, in the back of the diary, there are all these contributions from others about what happened to Louis Riel. What does Louis Riel mean? Why is he so significant? And like, what was this terrible injustice that occurred? So I hope that community members, descendants, scholars, people who kind of know the figures from this time in history, maybe eventually they can figure out who wrote all these other things in the notebook.
The devotion runs until September 1st and can be found online at digitalcollections.ucalgary.ca. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Calgary.
Well, if you've been watching recent coverage of protests in Winnipeg and the calls to search the landfills, you may have wondered, was that Logan's stats? The award-winning Mohawk musician and activist is no stranger to showing up at protests. He was even arrested in 2021 during an RCMP raid on Wet'suwet'en territory. For more on why he wanted to show support for Camp Morgan and Camp Mercedes, Logan Stats joined our Dennis Ward.
Logan, appreciate you taking some time here for us. I guess a little, why did you want to come to Winnipeg to support those calling for the landfills to be searched?
Well, we got a call at Land Back Lane. You know, there's a network when it comes to these movements, you know, and we try to support each other, build one another up, you know. So we got a call that they needed support, you know. So when we got that call, I made the decision, you know, to come out and support in any way that I can, you know. And I just thought to myself, you know, what if this was my daughter? What if this was my mom? You know, my sister? You know, so that really kind of sparked the fuel in the fire and behind my reasoning to come out and support, you know, my fellow warriors.
Well, it was a busy time while you were around. You know, one of the First Nations Indigenous warriors was arrested. There was the action at the police headquarters, as well as the protest outside of the World Police and Fire Games. What stands out for you during your time in Winnipeg?
The strength, you know, the tenacity of the warriors on the ground. Also the generosity. You know, I was spending a lot of time at the Camp Mercedes at the Human Rights Museum, you know, so seeing the generosity in camp and how they're, you know, made a commitment to helping the community and others that are around in the area, you know, that was really inspiring to me, you know, and to see everybody pull together when that warrior was arrested, you know, to see everyone pull together and show up at the police station. You know, I'm sure there's mixed reviews about that, but for me, I'm in full support of that. I thought it was a beautiful moment of peaceful resistance, you know.
You mentioned Land Back Lane. Of course, you performed at 1492 Land Back Lane camp. Were arrested in Wet'suwet'en territory during that RCMP raid there. Why are these important causes for you to show up for?
I think, you know, one of the biggest parts for me is it's medicine in these spaces. You know, there's good people, there's camaraderie, there's brothers and there's sisters, and, you know, there's love and there's peace and people standing together, you know, and I think all of us kind of, you know, search for something to be a part of that is bigger than ourselves, you know, and me defending our land, defending our people, you know, pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into that sort of thing. It's something that I know I'm doing the right thing. You know, I don't have to think about it. It's a no-brainer. When I think about the government and their lack of resources towards searching these landfills, to me, it's a no-brainer, you know. You know, and I ask everyone, I urge everyone to just think about it for 1 second. Just take a moment and think about it. You know, what if this was your grandma or your sister or your daughter? Because I know for me, I'd be out there on my hands and my knees digging, you know? And I think the rest of the nation, if they slow down and think about it, they'd feel that way too, you know?
Logan, we'll leave it there, but do appreciate you taking some time for us here and maybe catch up with you when you're back.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I appreciate you too, man. Onagawahi.
Indigenous people in Nebraska are leading a search for the remains of their ancestors. Built on the territorial land of the Pawnee tribe, the Genoa U.S. Industrial School housed 4,300 children from 45 nations in the area for more than a century. Shirley Snavy at ICT News, an organization from the United States, brings us this story.
We're out here this week doing some investigation on one of those anomaly features, as we call them, that turned up in some of the ground penetrating radar data. And we've laid out an excavation block, and we're taking that down really systematically, really slowly, in order to determine if we can identify first that anomaly that showed up in the ground penetrating radar data, and second, to determine if there are any intact burials in this location.
And it's been a slow process, because how life is, sometimes you just don't have the support from the government, federal, state, and it just kind of happened that Secretary Holland was appointed by this administration, and that really helped, put the boarding school initiative as one of her top priorities. And the lens of that, also the Genoa Digitizing Reconciliation Project at the Great Plains Center, that was a big part of our research, and that's ongoing. So things came together finally, and it's taken us several years just to get now here to this search.
Representatives from tribal nations and descendants of Genoa students were at the site.
I look at it as a ceremony. I don't perceive it as exhuming or a dig or anything like that. Those words are so harsh and they're very colonialized. And that's really not what this is about. It's about finding answers and finding the children, and we want to give them the respect and honor that they deserve and that they did not have.
No remains were found when the search ended Thursday. Work will continue sometime later. In Genoa, Nebraska, with Kevin Aberast, Shirley Snavy, ICT News.
All right, we have to pause our news program one more time here. Our photo of the day and weather are next. Plus, salmon are welcome back to the Yukon with a ceremony.
It's important to look to that relationship that we have as people, that we have with the natural world.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. From one of our many favorite contributors, Clarence Jones sends us a photo of two Gitxsan bucks with their velvet-covered antlers taking a stroll through the Gitxsan Nation. Now, we want to see your pictures. You can send those photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning on the east coast at 23 in St. John's and clearing 26 in Halifax. 18 degrees with showers in Cartwright and 22 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 20 in Quebec City, and 22 in Montreal. 28 degrees in Toronto and 26 in North Bay. 22 degrees in Wawa and 25 in Sioux Lookout. 20 degrees in Churchill and 24 in Norway House. Clear and 23 in Barons River and clear and 29 in Winnipeg. 33 degrees in Regina and 32 in Saskatoon. 25 in Buffalo Narrows and 22 in Stony Rapids. As we head west to 19 in Fort Chipewyan and 20 in Peace River. 24 in Edmonton and 32 in Medicine Hat. 24 degrees in Vancouver and 28 in Campbell River. 19 degrees in Sandspit and 21 in Fort Nelson. 23 in Beaver Creek and 20 in Old Crow. 25 degrees in Wrigley and 23 in Norman Wells. 15 degrees in Inuvik and 20 in Colville Lake. 23 degrees in Clear in Baker Lake and 19 in Clear in Arviat. 13 degrees in Igloolik and 18 in Iqaluit. It's the beginning of salmon season in the Yukon. Their migration was honored with celebration and song on Tuesday.
It lives in the water. It lives in the water.
Elders, youth, and First Nations leaders gathered at the Whitehorse Fish Ladder to welcome the deeply respected fish. Officials say salmon like Chinook have declined in number in recent decades due to things like climate change and the addition of salmon hatcheries into wild populations. Around 34,000 Chinook are expected to enter Canada this season. That number is slightly higher than previous years.
It's important to look to that relationship that we have as people, that we have with the natural world, with the salmon, and with all the things that the salmon provides to our land, to our animals, to our fish, to our insects, to all the living things on our land.
Acclaimed filmmaker Alanis Obomsawin is the topic of a sweeping new exhibit at the University of Toronto Art Gallery. A new major exhibit at the Art Museum at the University of Toronto will feature the life's work of legendary filmmaker Alanis Obomsawin. Her work will be presented by each decade, and spectators will have exclusive access to the production's archives, complete with artwork, prints, music, and documents. The exhibit, titled "The Children Have to Hear Another Story," will run from September 7th to November the 25th of this year. Certainly looks like an exhibit worth seeing if you are in the area. All right, that's all we have for you on this Wednesday edition of APTN National News. As always, for more Indigenous news and information on any of our stories, our website, aptnnews.ca, has you covered. For all of us here, I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, Kinanaskamatin, and have a great night.